So I'm pleased to call this meeting to order, seeing that we have quorum. We have 3 meetings in our comprehensive reports to deal with. We have 2 statutory committee meetings on the agenda tonight. I'll begin by reading the public meeting introduction, and there will be an opportunity for the public to make comments or ask questions in both of these sections of the meeting. So, notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the back of the room is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning and Development. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. There is also a sign-in sheet for interested members of the public at the back of the room. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. An exception to this rule is combined reports, which consolidates the public meeting and comprehensive reports. These applications are deemed by staff as straightforward and routine. This business practice has been in place for a number of years and is received by the applicants as efficient customer service and effective use of committee time. Please note that staff use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to planning and development staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to the planning committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. The committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So we'll move to our first public meeting, and I hit the wrong button here, I just have to find it, has to do with an official plan and a zoning bylaw amendment regarding as of right parking. So I will turn the floor over to our planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the public, members of the Planning Committee, and staff. My name is Sukriti Agarwal. I am a project manager with the city's planning division, and I'll be presenting the proposed city-initiated official plan and zoning bylaw amendment regarding residential parking and driveways. This public meeting was previously scheduled to be held on June 6th. However, it was deferred at that time. A new notice has been provided in the Kingston Week Standard advertising the new date. To date, staff have received 12 pieces of correspondence regarding this application. So just a little bit of background and context as to why we are proposing the changes to regulations around parking and driveways in residential areas. As you may know, there is provincial direction to increase as of right permissions for second residential units across the city. Council, at the last council meeting, had approved the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment related to second residential units. You may also know that the province, through Bill 108, is now changing rules which would now be asking municipalities to allow a third unit on a lot, which could be located within the primary dwelling or in an accessory building. So staff want to take a proactive approach to the increased demand for parking in residential areas. With the opening up of permissions related to second units, the expectation is that on-street parking will be used more frequently and for longer durations than what's permitted by the parking bylaw. And we also know that there is limited ability for residential lots to provide off-street parking based on the current zoning regulations. And the other thing is that the existing zoning regulations regarding parking in a driveway in a portion of a front yard do not conform with the OP policies. So with respect to the official plan policies, there are two sets of policies that apply to residential areas. One is for new development, where the official plan policies speak to front yard parking. So front yard parking is not permitted except for parking in a driveway leading to a permitted parking space in a garage side or rear yard. There's a second set of policies for existing residential areas where the official plan discourages front yard parking and restricts parking to rear yards, side yards, and garages. And then there's also a set of criteria for the review of requests to establish front yard parking. For example, if we were looking at a minor variance application or a zoning bylaw amendment application relating to front yard parking, there's a set of criteria that the application would have to demonstrate how it meets the intent of those policies. So this is just a graphic that shows the current rules as it relates to our zoning bylaws. In residential zones, parking in a driveway in a portion of a front yard is permitted where the driveway leads to a permitted parking space in a garage side or rear yard. So as you can see, this regulation more or less mirrors the new development section of the official plan, where it does permit parking in a driveway where the driveway is leading to a garage, a side yard, or a rear yard. However, the zoning bylaws do not distinguish between new areas or residential areas, and that's where that nonconformity is currently. Oops, sorry. I'm just going to close this. So in this graphic, on the left-hand side, within this property, here is the driveway, which is leading to a side yard space. So the side yard space is the space between the building and the side lot line. So where there is enough space in the side yard to be able to park a vehicle, the zoning allows for a vehicle to be parked in front of that. A different situation in this case on the right-hand side, where there is an existing garage on the property. The zoning bylaws permit a vehicle to be parked in a driveway in front of the garage. And the city has 5 principal zoning bylaws in effect. The maximum permitted driveway widths in a residential zone vary across the bylaws. Within Kingston Township and Pittsburgh Township, the maximum permitted driveway widths are 40% of the lot width, or 6 meters, whichever is lesser. Within the Cataraqui North bylaw, the driveway widths are greater than what's permitted in these areas. They are typically at 50% of the lot width. Within the central Kingston area, driveway widths are generally the width of the garage. However, there are no clear regulations in the central Kingston area in zoning bylaw 8499 with respect to the minimum or maximum width of a driveway. So through this amendment, we are looking to bring together the official plan policies regarding new and existing low-density residential development. So as I mentioned, there are two sets of policies, one for new development, one for existing residential areas. We're proposing to bring these together. The main change would be that these type of residential developments will not have front yard parking except for parking in a permitted driveway as per the provisions of the bylaw. So one of the main changes is that we are removing the restriction that parking in a driveway is only permitted where the driveway leads to a garage side or a rear yard. So, and I have some illustrations to show what this exactly means, which I'll be discussing shortly. And the third amendment to the official plan is adding a new criteria to section 4.6.60, which is related to requests to establish front yard parking. So we would just want to make sure that whenever a driveway is being widened, that it doesn't include, it doesn't result in an destruction or injury to a city tree within the municipal road allowance. So, so in this image, so the left image shows our existing rules. So you can park in a driveway where the driveway leads to a garage. In this situation, this is what we are proposing. Residents will be allowed to park in a driveway where the driveway is not leading to a garage or a side yard. So that is one of the main changes relating to residential parking and driveways in our zoning bylaws. There are several situations within the older part of the city where development did not contemplate automobiles. They were built before, like in the early 1900s, and there is really no space to be able to park a vehicle based on our current zoning regulations. So the proposed changes would address those type of situations. I also wanted to mention that in no way is the intent of staff to allow the whole front lawn to be paved for parking purposes. That is not at all the intent of the proposed amendment. The proposed amendment would restrict the driveway widths to 40% of the lot width or 6 meters, whichever is lesser. So 6 meters is about a 20-foot wide driveway, which can accommodate 2 cars side by side, and that's the maximum that we are proposing. So similar to the official plan amendment, similar changes are being proposed to the zoning bylaws where vehicles would be allowed to park in a portion of a front yard in a permitted driveway only. And then in zoning bylaw number 8499, we are adding new provisions related to the maximum and minimum driveway widths permitted. Minimum driveway widths are also proposed to be added to the other bylaws which do not speak to a minimum driveway width. At this time, we are proposing a minimum driveway width of 3 meters, which should be able to accommodate 1 car width. The other change is permitting tandem parking, which is 1 car parked behind the other in areas where it's currently not permitted. So some of our zoning bylaws already permit tandem parking. Some permit tandem parking only for second residential units. However, through this amendment, they will be permitted across all of the residential zones. So again, just reiterating, the intent of these proposed amendments is to take a proactive approach to the anticipated increased demand that we will be seeing as a result of second units within our residential areas. The intent of these proposed amendments is to provide additional opportunities for off-street parking, while at the same time trying to strike a balance between the need for maintaining the streetscape and neighborhood character. The proposed amendments are supportive of second residential units, which are an important tool in contributing to the supply of affordable housing in the city. They also provide an opportunity to establish off-street parking spaces in situations where properties don't have access to a garage or a side yard that is wide enough to accommodate a vehicle, or a side yard that can provide access to the rear yard for a vehicle. And the proposed amendments would also contribute to enhanced accessibility, with parking spaces being potentially being able to be located closer to the main entrance of a dwelling. So just a few more illustrations to explain the proposed changes. The two illustrations on the left are the existing rules. So in this case, the leftmost illustration, residents are permitted to park in a driveway in a portion of the front yard. So a front yard is the area between the front wall of a building and the front lot line, which is adjacent to the municipal right-of-way. So if there was a garage on the property and a driveway is leading, of course, the driveway will be leading to a garage, residents are allowed to park on a driveway. However, where there is no garage, as in the center illustration, residents are not allowed to park within the driveway, because then our existing rules do not permit that. So what we are proposing is to remove that restriction. So even if there was no garage on a property, people would be able to park within their driveway. Some more illustrations. So in the leftmost image, there is a garage located in the back of a property, and currently a vehicle may be parked within a driveway that's leading to a garage. However, if your driveway was short, you are not allowed to park like that within the front yard. So we are proposing to, again, like I said, remove that restriction. The driveway is no longer required, would be no longer required to be leading to a garage or a parking space in a side yard or the rear yard. One of the other advantages of this approach is that there could be more space dedicated to landscaping on a property as compared to like having these really long driveways, or for example, like even if somebody had to park here, would be able to park closer to the front lot line, and then would be able to dedicate some of this additional space on the property for landscape purposes. I also just wanted to speak quickly about the driveway widths and orientation. Like I mentioned, the maximum width of a driveway within the required front yard, so which is this area in front of the building, is proposed at 40% of the lot width, or 6 meters, whichever is lesser. So like I mentioned, 6 meters would only be able to get you, would only be able to provide 2 cars parked side by side. Beyond the required front yard, so for example, if in the zoning bylaw the minimum required front yard is, let's say, 6 meters, however, the dwelling was located at 12 meters, so within that additional 6 meter space between the minimum required front yard and the building, we are looking to allow the driveway width to be equal to the width of the garage, if there is a garage that's wider than the width that's proposed within that front yard portion. One of the other things is that we are proposing is that a driveway would not be permitted parallel to the street within the required front yard, because this does have the effect of negatively impacting the streetscape character if a vehicle is parked parallel to the street within a front yard situation. So these type of situations we would still have to look at on a case-by-case, site-by-site basis. So they would still have to go through a minor variance process, and we will be reviewing such requests at that time. Again, some more illustrations regarding the parking space location. the leftmost illustration shows that a vehicle is straddling the municipal right-of-way and a little bit over the municipal sidewalk. That's not permitted. A parking space must be located entirely on private property, not on municipal property. Again, here's another situation where a vehicle is parked in the front lawn. That's not permitted. It has to be parked on a driveway, which is permitted by the zoning bylaw. Again, another situation here where a vehicle is parked partially on a driveway and partially on grass. Again, that would not be permitted. And then this last situation where there is not enough space between the front of the dwelling and the front lot line to be able to park a vehicle. Those situations, again, we would have to look at them on a case-by-case basis. If we can look at other configurations that would work on the property. Staff looked at some other municipalities with respect to how other municipalities are dealing with parking in a driveway in low-density residential areas. Oakville, Newmarket, Oshawa, Barrie, Mississauga, and London, they all permit parking in a driveway in a portion of a front yard, similar to what we are proposing currently. Vaughan and Kingston, they currently only permit parking in a driveway in a portion of a front yard where the driveway leads to a garage or a side yard or a rear yard parking space. We also looked at whether or not municipalities permit tandem or stacked parking, and most of the municipalities do permit that. However, Newmarket and Vaughan do not have any regulations related to tandem parking in their bylaws. One of the other changes through this work that we are proposing is regulating the temporary parking of recreational vehicles, watercraft, and trailers within the residential zones. The current regulations permit the parking of such vehicles within a garage or other building, or in a rear yard or interior side yard, but not closer than 1 meter to any lot line, and not in any required parking space or side triangle. So a side triangle, generally it applies to corner lots. There is a calculation which applies. The main thing is that it should not be blocking views, like when people are trying to make turns on a street, so that corner is required to be vacant of any buildings and structures, vehicular parking and things like that. And the current zoning bylaws allow for the temporary parking of recreational vehicles, watercraft, and trailers in a front yard. So the current bylaws do not speak to a driveway or anything. It just says you're permitted to park a recreational vehicle or a watercraft or a trailer within the front yard or in an exterior side yard. So again, an exterior side yard usually would apply to a corner lot as well. So one side is considered the front yard and the other side is an exterior side yard. So these type of vehicles are permitted to be parked in these yards for 72 hours in one calendar month throughout the year. Staff have received several comments from members of the public that the 72-hour restriction is it's very restrictive. Sometimes people don't have enough time to be able to load a boat, load it off, do some repairs within that 72-hour time limit. And staff also have difficulties in enforcing that 72-hour time limit because staff are not out there going around streets every day. So it's difficult for staff to determine whether or not a vehicle has been parked within a driveway for 72 hours or more than that. So there are some changes that we are proposing just to the temporary parking piece. We are proposing to remove the 72-hour in a month time limit restriction and regulate the temporary parking of recreational vehicles, watercraft, and trailers on a season-based approach. So what we are proposing is these type of vehicles may be parked in a permitted driveway, in a front yard, or in an exterior side yard between April 1 and October 31st of each year. So these would include vehicles such as a boat, motorhome, travel trailer, but not both. So you could either have a motorhome or a travel trailer, a personal watercraft, an all-terrain vehicle, or a similar recreational vehicle or a utility trailer. If you had a snowmobile, you could only park it within the winter months within a driveway in a front yard. So one of the changes is that we have introduced, the current regulations do not speak to parking in a driveway. They just said you're permitted to park these vehicles in the front yard. So we want to clarify it has to be within, parking of such vehicles has to be within a driveway, but not closer than 1 meter from any lot line. And also a recreational vehicle, watercraft or trailer parking must not displace the vehicle parking on property. So it's not the intent as at all that the automobile, the car would be parked on the street. They are only permitted these type of vehicles on property if they can accommodate them in addition to the private automobile. So with respect to a review of other municipalities, Burlington, Oakville, and Cambridge have also adopted a seasonal-based approach for temporary vehicles parking. The where permitted, so the yards where permitted, that generally varies among these different municipalities. So for example, Burlington allows the temporary parking in any yard on a seasonal basis. Oakville only permits it in a driveway, depending on the height and the maximum length of the vehicle, or within an exterior side yard, interior side yard, or rear yard. So if it exceeds a maximum height, it's only permitted within those areas. And Cambridge permits such vehicles on a temporary basis in a driveway. New Market permits temporary parking of such vehicles in a driveway for 8 days in a calendar month. Oshawa and Vaughan have no regulations regarding temporary parking. They only have regulations regarding the permanent parking of such vehicles. Mississauga has a similar approach as Kingston, which is 72 hours in a calendar month. And London also did not have any regulations related to temporary parking. So this sums up my presentation. I'm happy to answer comments and questions.
Thank you. Would you like to comment, or a staff member like to comment on any correspondence we've received regarding this public meeting?
Yes, so to date we've received 12 pieces of correspondence, and notice was provided in accordance with the Planning Act in the Kingston Vic Standard on June 11th.
Thank you. I'll turn to the committee now if there are any questions at this time regarding this proposal. Seeing none? Oh, sorry. So much for peripheral vision. Go ahead.
The City of Kingston on March 5th declared a climate emergency. And it seems to me, I'd like to know how this proposed amendments of additional cars being allowed to park on property is benefiting or addressing the climate emergency, is my first question.
So thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Chair. I am just going to take us back to this illustration. So the reality is that vehicles are being currently parked on streets if they're not being able to be located on private property, which does result in operational challenges as it relates to street maintenance, snow removal in the winter months. Specifically regarding climate emergency and how through these amendments, we also anticipate people would no longer need longer driveways, as they will be able to park vehicles within, like for example, in this situation where, you know, a garage could be located up front and you would not, you wouldn't even need a garage. Some people don't have garages. So longer driveways could be replaced with landscape open space, which would result in more stormwater absorption, which indirectly does have a positive impact on the environment.
But if an existing garage is there, I doubt they'll replace it with grass. So how does this proposal augment or support the Kingston's active transportation plan? So support the active transportation plan. And then if parking on streets are an issue for snow removal and whatnot, wouldn't enforcement of issuing parking tickets be more beneficial than creating this issue on the lots? And the only reason I ask this question is because I do have some streets where I got lots of concerns with already more residential cars per resident, creating traffic problems. And I think it's enforcement of traffic violation and issuing tickets that would resolve a lot of this and encourage people to move elsewhere rather than try to park.
For your question, Councillor, through Mr. Chair. With respect to the city's active transportation plan, there is only so much municipal right-of-way within the street. And that municipal right-of-way is split up between travel lanes for vehicles, travel lanes for non-auto modes, pedestrians to use on sidewalks, and in many cases, on-street parking areas. So the ability to manage and sort of balance all of those uses across the right-of-way, the priorities that exist in our plans suggest that we need to ensure that there is space for active transportation and protected space. And in most instances, that involves removing on-street parking, both short-term and long-term, to create that space. So that is the aspect in how it relates to the active transportation infrastructure. Your second question as it relates to enforcement, also I think in a way relates to what Ms. Agarwal presented with the practical difficulty in enforcing some of those pieces. So the city's bylaw allows any vehicle to be parked for up to 12 hours unless it's otherwise signed or regulated. Enforcing a 12-hour restriction requires multiple visits. And oftentimes over multiple days in order to rectify that behavior. And such, I think through these amendments, it's looking at providing a legal alternative to address the need that exists that's presently being addressed on street.
Thank you. Did you have anything else, Councillor Chappelle?
And I was wondering if you had an opportunity to look in communities where secondary suites are already permitted and looked at the parking scenario, and if you had any thoughts on those, because I often see areas, and we didn't discuss it here, where we have a driveway that is now extended wider with I would say, concrete or patio stones, so they create two spots. And I was just wondering if you visited anywhere in the community that you saw this impact, or where in the community of Kingston you see this having the greatest impact?
So there are some areas within the city where the lot widths are really narrow. And we have seen in the past that residents, like you mentioned, like have added a walkway and they're parking a vehicle on the walkway, which is currently not permitted, and we would typically enforce these on a complaint-based system. Through this, the second units do require a walkway as well. However, that is not meant to be like a vehicle cannot be parked. It has to be an unobstructed walkway. If there are situations again then that come up like that, of course, we will be looking at them from like how best to enforce something like that. But yes, I do agree there are some areas within the city where, because of the narrow lot widths, Either they have requested site-specific amendments to have wider driveways to be able to park two vehicles side by side, which has impacted the ability to provide on-street parking in those areas. And in some cases, people have resorted to adding what they call walkways in a different material than asphalt, but the reality is that they are parking in those areas.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Two questions, actually. I'm looking just at this diagram here, and I see that there's a side setback. Is that an expectation, or will driveways be able to go right to the property line along the sides?
Drivers would be able to go right to the property line.
Okay, can you go to the slide where you have the garage? So I'm looking at the one on the left-hand side now. So if that house was a single garage, would they still be able to build the double driveway out front so long as it didn't exceed the 40% of the front yard vegetation?
Yes.
Yes, okay. The whole purpose of this, I'm assuming, is to get cars off the street. Or one of the purposes of this, at least, is to get cars off the street, kind of maintain the ambiance of the neighborhood, that sort of thing, right? But getting cars off the street is a critical consideration with the secondary units coming?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is one of the considerations behind this as well. Yep.
Can you go to the parallel, or sort of the driveway, the curved driveway or the circular driveway? There. So in my district, there's a number of homes that currently have driveways like that. And I guess what I'm wondering is, if it doesn't exceed the 40% lot coverage, I guess, on the front yard, is there a particular reason why we don't want that to happen?
So we don't want that to happen because in this situation, it does have a negative impact on the streetscape character with a vehicle parked in front of the building within that required minimum front yard area. That is the main reason behind this restriction.
If I could just, let's, looking at the dwelling on the right with the X on it, if that was a garage that was on the left-hand side of that piece of property, so that a car could go, you could park a car in the garage, a car in behind it, tandem, and a car in front, I mean, you've got 3 cars off the street then. You know, I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's just, I think that might be something that we could maybe take another look at and maybe consider whether or not that would require an enhanced piece of front yard property in order to be able to do that. Just a suggestion. And then my last thing was, is there any potential around recreational vehicles to ask the developers of new subdivisions to include as part of that subdivision a parking area so that people in that district could or that area could park their have a place to park recreational vehicles that doesn't include parking them on their property or in their driveways? Is that something that we could ask of developers, or is that outside of our boundaries, I guess?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we could certainly ask that, but that would require them to dedicate a lot of open area on their properties, and these days we are seeing smaller lots. So I don't really know how practical it would be for us to be. We can definitely put forward that suggestion, however, I don't
guess
know.
my question would be more, could we pass a motion requiring that? And would we be within our rights to do that under provincial legislation?
So you would pass a motion, would that be in the zoning bylaw? Because the thing is, if it's, like, currently this is being regulated through zoning.
Right.
So if there is no requirement through zoning, but through something else, I mean, it would have to apply to all residential properties, and I don't really think that would be feasible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And I think around the second aspect, I think, Councillor Hill, what you were describing was an off-site area, parking area that would allow private vehicles to park within that community. I think Generally, that is sort of essentially a public parking lot that you're describing. Under the city's policies from a transportation perspective, we wouldn't necessarily develop large surface parking areas solely for the provision of parking private vehicles within that neighborhood. There are opportunities to share parking in neighborhoods with respect to some of our recreation facilities and the way that we use those to support park and rides and other locations. But a single purpose public parking area for private recreational vehicles is not something that would generally fit in with the city's transportation policies within a neighborhood.
Thank you. Councillor Rousseau, and then Councillor Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, with what's proposed for residential parking, how are we going to ensure that like front yard trees aren't cut down so that people can, like park the cars on their front lawn? That's what my concern is, and I don't follow. Are they going to, like if we change the zoning bylaw, do people apply to then try to get this parking, and that's how we can ensure that trees won't be cut down, or is there no way to enforce that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the tree is located on municipal property, a permit would be required to take down that tree. If the tree is located on private property and it's a residential lot, the tree bylaw does permit the removal of trees. So yeah, that's something that we would not be able to regulate based on our existing tree bylaw.
Thank you. And my questions are about vehicles and what we're proposing to change. So if somebody does have 2 jet skis on their driveway, and if the neighbor then was having problems with sight lines, right, backing out of their driveway, they could then call Bylaw and put in a complaint, and Bylaw would come to investigate if they were having problems backing out of their driveway because of all the recreational vehicles on the neighbor next door to them.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so the recreational vehicles are required to be located entirely on private property. Typically, there is space in front of, space between the property line and the actual like asphalt pavement, which is the roadway. Generally, we would have a sidewalk or a boulevard. So that's not the portion of the driveway where somebody would be able to park. So the intent is that it should not cause issues with sight lines and things like that, because parking is to be located on private property, not within the municipal road allowance. But yes, if someone has issues, they can definitely contact the city.
And about if you want to park recreational vehicles, like from April 1st to October 31st on their driveway, do any of the other cities that you looked at, do they require a special permit be allowed for that?
Not that I know of, can certainly look into that.
Then that last slide about recreational vehicles that shows all the other cities. Mr. Clerk, would we be able to get a copy of that one slide? Because that will come in handy. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through a question about the current bylaw in Kingston West. I think it's Bylaw 76 from the Old Township that refers to the parking of recreational vehicles. Can you confirm that individuals currently are allowed to park either beside their house or in their backyard for their recreational vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. They are currently allowed to park a recreational vehicle in the side or the rear yard.
And so would this proposed amendment to the bylaw allow that to continue, or would it only be allowed to be parked in the front driveway for the season?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would still continue. The main change is parking of such vehicles on a temporary basis. So currently we only allow the temporary parking of such vehicles in a front yard for 72 hours in a calendar month. So that's what's being proposed to be changed to a seasonal basis. But yes, they can still park such vehicles within the side yard or the rear yard or in a garage.
All right, and in the side yard or rear yard, that can happen throughout the year currently?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then my final question is about a petition that my predecessor presented to, I think it was the second last council meeting, from residents in now my district about this issue. I'm wondering if that has been considered. It was about 75 people who signed a petition in support of changes to Bylaw 76. If not, I can send it along.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wasn't aware of that petition, but yes, I would appreciate it if you
Okay,
could
thank you.
forward it to me. Thanks.
Thank you. If you could take the chair, that would be great.
Chair, I recognize you.
Thank you. Something that Councillor Sanik pointed out, and I just want to reinforce, our bylaws in very large part are complaint driven. And nothing is more frustrating than having somebody say to a councillor, they've been breaking this bylaw for months, why haven't you done anything? And you ask them, have you reported it? And the answer, more times than not, is no. We don't drive around trying to catch people breaking bylaws in large part. It's complaint driven. So, yeah. Can you go back to the slide, and this is for a specific question, that showed the semicircular, yeah, that one. In that middle one, and this is a question specific to a constituent. Currently, as soon as it's legal, they will have a secondary suite, so this can benefit them. The garage is farther back, but they wanted to allow tandem parking closer to their front property of the house line. And am I correct in, and they're going to need 10 or 12 inches to be able to fit two cars side by side. So they're that middle example that you see there. As long as they meet the 40% rule, they'll be able to add a little bit more pavement that will sneak slightly in front of their current house. Is that accurate?
So yes, it depends on the width of the lot. So generally speaking, if a lot is 50 feet wide, they would be able to get a driveway that is 20 feet in width, which would be two cars side by side.
Yeah.
If the lot width is less, then they won't be able to get that.
And am I right in some of the motivation for this, what I think is a very sensible amendment, but this amendment has to do with the PPS, the provincial policy statement, that is really, really encouraging secondary suites. And they're looking to make sure communities aren't using other bylaws to discourage secondary suites. So parking, we've all heard when people have come in to request a secondary suite, is a primary complaint within the community. So is that accurate? That
Yes, that is. So one of the reasons behind these amendments is the as-of-right permissions for second residential units that are being implemented across the city in residential zones. The province has indicated that the only thing municipalities can regulate is parking for second units. So yes, this is in part related to that.
great. Thank you.
You can take the chair back.
Thank you much. Seeing no other questions from the committee, I will now open it up to the public. There are microphones at both corners. When you go to a microphone, you'll have 5 minutes to make comments or ask questions. And within those 5 minutes, at the very beginning, you should identify yourself, name and address. Okay? Was there any staff that wanted to say anything before we open it up to the public? Seeing none, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon, 495 Alfred, Apartment 2, K7K, 4J4. So I'm going to begin by commending staff for what I really think is excellent work on this. You've contacted other communities to learn a lot of information that you brought to us here right now, so that's very good. I'm taking a scientist approach to this, sort of looking at the different orientations that are possible. So I'll just begin by talking about my own situation. Live in a house that's been subdivided into 3 apartments and has a long driveway from the street right to the garage at the back. So would there be possible to have 3 cars in the garage, 1 for each unit in the house? So there's enough room for that. I'm going to move on to some suggestions. As the chair explained, and as I learned talking to staff before the meeting, this is essentially a complaint-driven process. And you can imagine that there's a multiplicity of different orientations possible. Like we saw some of them in the diagrams that you showed tonight, right? So those are only some of the possibilities. And you can imagine that there will be quite a few others. So I'm going to make 2 suggestions in a respectful manner on this. And one of them is that the city would work to create a database of all situations. The complaint-driven basis would still apply. There would be a lot of work for staff to do that. But what I'm saying is that you could be assisted by property owners. They could submit drawings of their own situation, along with, say, questions on maybe what they would like to do. I want to add a secondary suite. Can I have guest parking, this time, and so forth. And perhaps that they could work with their district councilors and with staff on that to create that database of information. It would take quite a lot of time to do, but once you have it, then anybody could maybe plug into it and say, okay, well, my situation is similar to what's happening over there. I think I should be able to do this. Is that the case? And then my final point would be, is I'm wondering if planning staff are going to be sharing the outcome of this process. Like we're going to talk tonight, there might be amendments, it'll come to council eventually, it'll probably be passed. Are you going to inform all those other cities that you've been in touch with on what Kingston has been doing? So, thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to mention, in the public portion, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, all of the questions are gathered and they'll be answered completely at the end by staff or by the proponents. So, any other member? Yes? Sorry. The floor is yours.
You'll have to bear with me, I'm not used to this. Hello, my name is Denise Hodge. I currently live and have lived there for a long time, 27 Bishop Street and K7M3P5. And I have been in touch with both Mr. Hill and Ms. Agarwal. Did I say your name correctly? Thank you. My husband and I are here tonight because we do have, like those of us from the community, have vested interests in some of these proposed changes. And as the previous speaker mentioned, we'd both like to congratulate everybody on recognizing many residents' needs to have a more relaxed kind of bylaw for many reasons. Ours pertains to the recreational vehicles. One thing I was going to speak to tonight, you have already answered, which is the issue of the front driveway. So I really only have one issue to mention, and that is not on the proposed changes, but I'd like it to be. We would like to amend the length restriction that is allowed on driveways. What the proposals that the proposed changes that you have outlined this evening look at different things, and we understand about the maintaining the streetscape and the neighborhood character. In other words, my understanding of that is you don't want clunkers in the driveway and you don't want the streetscape looking like it's a junkyard. We understand that. Most of us, I think, with recreational vehicles don't have clunkers. We certainly don't. The current bylaw doesn't even allow us to park our 31-foot Class C recreational vehicle in our driveway for 72 hours. It stipulates, however, ambiguously, that only recreational vehicles up to a length of 8.2 meters are allowed to be parked on driveways. So as the current bylaw reads, if I understand it correctly, we can't even park our vehicle in the driveway to unload or load to go on a trip. Kind of difficult to use your recreational vehicle when you can't park it in your driveway at all. And parking it on the street is not permissible either. We in fact did have one of your bylaw officers tell us that we should park our RV on the street. We parked our RV on the street, in our driveway to begin with, because parking it on the street we thought was a safety hazard. Complaint-driven process. One of our neighbors didn't like the fact that he had to look at our RV, complained to the city. We had to move it, so that the bylaw officer said, well, it's a vehicle, park it on the street. And we said, well, we didn't want to do that because it's going to create a problem. It's a safety issue. Well, you're following a bylaw. Okay, so we tried that. The same person complained, and apparently we were contravening another bylaw that has to do with the weight, I believe it is, of the vehicle being parked on the street. And by the way, we did move our vehicle every 12 hours, so we were complying as best we knew how. So at any rate, I guess the point I'm making is that while you're looking at making changes, that's great, but it's really stressful for people who have a slightly larger recreational vehicle to comply with bylaws and not suffer, I guess is the best word, undue stress, trying to figure out how we're going to do this. So what we would like to do is propose that the length at least be, the maximum length rather, be increased to whatever you think is appropriate. Obviously, we have a vested interest. 9.5 meters we'd be able to work with that. But we're not the only ones we know who are in this situation. And we know that you're trying very hard to, I don't have the right word at the present moment, to deal with streamlining bylaws. They're a mess.
Excuse me, 30 seconds?
Sorry, anyone with half a brain can figure that out. So anyway, bottom line, we would like the length, the maximum length, to be increased to at least 9.5 meters. Think of this. You measure the length of the boat. It can be up to your maximum 8.2 meters, but you're not looking at the length of the trailer, which takes up space on a driveway too. You know, the same with hitches. They're not considered as part of the length of the vehicle, but they're taking up space. Well, our Class C, it's the same kind of thing. Plus, you're looking at non-motorized at 8.2. Why should we who have motorized vehicles be penalized because we have a contained unit? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. No problem.
Kim Connelly, 7 Toronto Street. We've been there for 20 years, and we have seen an increase in parking issues during that time. That's, for you who are not familiar, we're in Sydenham Ward. I have a couple of questions, one being, would there be a limit to the number of cars allowed on a lot, even with the secondary suite added? And the continuing parking in backyards, is that going to be allowed? I can tell you with certainty that we have about 8 houses in our neighborhood who have paved their backyards and made it into a parking pad, which leads to a very good question about climate change and flooding and where does all the water go if backyards are paved. And with respect, we have 2 properties around us, and I have been complaining about them since September. They are parking side by side in a single parking lot. One of them has a garage, one of them doesn't have a garage. And they park 2 cars in a single spot, and they are on the sidewalks and they are on their lawns. No one has enforced this, and that was told to me because we are reviewing our bylaws on this. So for the whole year, they've been allowed to do this, even though I have made a complaint. So it's not always enforced. And I'd also like to know if you can define a driveway. Is a driveway where the sidewalk, I don't know the technical terms, but where it narrows down, where there's an indication that it is actually a driveway, because we have, again, rental units that have parked cars on the side of a house that has no indication that it's a driveway. They park on the lawn, or they take away the lawn and put gravel down and park on there. So I guess I want to know, what is a driveway, and is there going to be a recommended surface for the driveway? If we don't have paved driveways or gravel driveways, we have people parking in the mud in the springtime, and it affects our streetscape. So if we're concerned about the streetscape, I think we should also consider driveways that aren't officially a driveway being allowed. And I think that's all I have. Let me just quickly check. Can I also just say, how are you going to enforce the 40%? Are you going to get out a yardstick? Do we have to get out a yardstick and say, oh, I'm sorry, but their driveway is 50% of their property. Can you come and address it? And that's all.
Thank you. Yes, hello.
Okay, thank you. Christine Jewell, I'm at 427 McCallum Street, which is in Greenwood Park. I'd like to applaud staff for coming out with a proposal that I think is quite a reasonable one to address a couple of different issues with the city that I see. I'm actually the co-chair of the Community Advisory Board for homelessness in Kingston. We have a very concerning low vacancy rate, and I applaud staff for trying to remove some of the barriers or challenges by allowing for secondary suites within the city, which will then hopefully, as we get more vacancy, obviously more people will be able to be housed, but may also reduce the costs of which has been increasing with the low vacancy rates as well. And hopefully will, in the end, reduce homelessness in Kingston as well. So I applaud staff for that, and for council for considering the proposed changes as well. From my own personal secondary aspect, I also applaud you for the proposed changes, which I think are reasonable for families who want to spend time with recreational activities. Kids are inside way too much. If you can get them out on, boats or jet skis or ski-doos in the wintertime, whatever, get them outside, more activities, more fresh air and sunshine. And this change would allow families a more affordable option to be able to have, a recreational vehicle or a boat in terms of doing it. And I think having the temporary parking for that allows for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other chairs occupied with mics, are there any other comments that people would like to make? Seeing none, I will turn to staff to respond to those comments and questions that were made, and then we'll very quickly come back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you to all members of the public who have provided comments. I'm just going to try and answer all of them. If I don't have an answer, I will certainly address it in the comprehensive report. One of the questions was regarding an existing 3-unit development, where a question was asked if one car for each unit could be parked in a driveway. I don't know if I understood that question correctly. Without actually looking at the specifics of that property, I'm not able to provide a response. Another comment was made about there were several orientations possible, and that is correct. I don't think that our proposed amendments would be able to address the several possible variations regarding parking, driveway orientation and parking possibilities. There will be certainly some situations which won't be able to comply with these proposed changes, and we will look at them on a case-by-case, side-by-side basis. There was a suggestion made regarding creating a database of existing situations within the city, assisted by property owners and also in association with council members. We do have, currently we do have a GIS database. However, it doesn't capture all of the changes that may have been made to a property. It depends on when that data would have been digitized. However, it's a great suggestion. I wish we could do something like that. However, we do review all of such requests. For example, when someone is putting in a driveway, they do need a permit from the city's engineering department to be able to pave within the municipal right-of-way portion of the driveway. So we do look at those situations, but not necessarily we will have all of the situations mapped in a spatial database. One of the other questions was if we will be informing, there will be more information coming, if we will be informing other municipalities of the proposed changes. And yes, staff do keep in touch with other municipalities in Ontario and share the changes that are going on within the municipalities as it relates to zoning regulations and emerging issues and emerging forms of land uses. The next question was around increasing the maximum permitted length of a recreational vehicle that is permitted on private properties to at least 9.5 meters. I will have to look at our previous reports as to how our existing 8.2 meter maximum length was determined, and I can certainly address that as part of my comprehensive report. One of the questions was related to a limit on the number of cars that could be parked on a lot. We are not looking at that. We are not proposing any limits to the number of vehicles that can be parked in a vehicle, as long as they are parked within a driveway that is permitted. As long as they can meet the landscape open space requirements, their lot coverage requirements, we are not proposing any limits on the number of vehicles. There was a comment made about paved backyards, which are converted to parking lots. This is a situation that we regularly come across, especially in the older part of the city, and we are continually enforcing these situations where we have had property owners remove the parking spaces and replace them with a permeable surface. Currently, only 2 vehicles are permitted to be parked in a rear yard, so we do have some regulations around that. If there are situations that the residents are aware of, I encourage them to contact the city. There was a comment about whether a driveway would be defined, like is there a recommended surface for a driveway? The zoning bylaws do require that driveways be a stable surface. I'd have to look at exactly whether they refer to the materials. Materials is something that generally cannot be regulated through zoning, but we do indicate driveways have to be a stable surface. We are proposing a new definition for a driveway in the bylaws where there is currently no definition. Most of the bylaws do have a definition, but there is, I think, in zoning bylaw 8499, whereas there is no definition of a driveway, we will be adding a new definition. There was a question regarding enforcing driveway widths. As I just mentioned, when people are putting in a new driveway, or if they are looking to expand a driveway, they do need a permit from the city's engineering department, at which time the engineering department consults with planning division staff, at which time we would be reviewing the proposed driveway widths. Also, as part of any new development, driveway widths are looked at through the building permit process as well. There was a comment made about removing barriers and challenges to allow for secondary units. That work was actually, it was one of my colleagues who had spearheaded that work, and I will pass on your thanks on to my colleague. Thank you for that comment. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I declare this closed, I just want to mention that this will probably, I would imagine, come back either in August or September with a comprehensive report and recommendation. And up until the time it gets to council, anybody can ask further questions, and you just have to address it through the clerk or through the planning department. So, okay. And we'll take it to the committee now. Councillor Connelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question through you that was alluded to by one of the residents. Are there any bylaws around the orientation of the vehicles within the driveway? So can cars park perpendicular to the driveway? And I ask because that's been an issue a few times in my district, and people have asked me about it, and I haven't had an immediate response. So if people wanted to park going the opposite direction, is that allowed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, currently there are no regulations that would prohibit that, but through this work we are proposing that cars are not permitted to be parked parallel to the street line. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Yeah, okay. So, as we've seen, there's numbers of different types of problems across the city. In the portion of the downtown that I represent, this has been an ongoing problem. And so I'm happy to see the staff are trying to come to grips with this. It's difficult because conditions are not always the same. So the big problem downtown, and the reason why parking the front yards of houses, and this whole issue about being able to park if there's a side yard, rear yard, garage, that originates in Bylaw 8499 and just goes from there. It just keeps proliferating. And the big problem is people don't want to be living in a parking lot. And I've expressed that. I met with staff who graciously gave me some time, and they listed about, I would say, 10 to 12 different reasons why they needed the changes, existing bylaws. So the main thing is aesthetic and the sense of streetscape and crowded nature of it when there's cars all over the place. And this comes up on every once in a while for the councillor. And the other thing is the environmental part of it has to do with stormwater management and drainage. And when you have higher densities, the more that becomes an issue. The third reason is that the city does not want its infrastructure covered in cement. I've had people close off their back lane, they probably even know it had been closed off. Happened like 50 years ago. And then they wanted to put their cement pad beside the house. There was city infrastructure under there and they didn't want it. If they needed to get at it quickly, that would be a problem. So there are reasons for this. I've had the talk with staff and I had this deferred from last meeting, at least I initiated it, and I'm satisfied with the answers they gave and the explanation, which seems to be a new one, but better explains what they had in mind. So the other thing is the enforcement. I agree with that. I think we do not enforce it strongly enough, and when it is complained about, we don't pursue it strongly enough, including having the asphalt that doesn't meet the measurements removed. And that is a problem I see and will be until we start saying, nope, that's got to go. You can't pave your backyard. You can't pave your front yard. You know, it's not a parking lot we're creating here. So I will vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Any further question? If I can once again ask the Vice Chair to take the chair.
I take the chair. Right.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick comments. The woman from Sydenham District described an issue that happens a lot in Williamsville as well. And sometimes there are illegal parking lots being established in people's backyards. And some of those are amenity, when they're green spaces, are approved amenity spaces that were committed to when a zoning request was put forward. And then, because it's very profitable, it gets paved and suddenly there's parking for rent signs that go in the front yard. And if you have those questions, definitely contact through the city, but also CC your city councillor, because those need to be dealt with for the same reasons that my colleague just mentioned. That's creates stormwater management issues when that happens. So, and you mentioned a frustration and the fact that there was a mention that, well, the bylaw is being amended. Regardless of what amendments are coming forward, bylaws are bylaws. And we should be dealing with them and never make the excuse, well, we're about to amend that bylaw. The bylaws exist and we should be dealing with those. So, thank you very much.
You can take the chair back.
Thank you. And I will now declare this meeting closed. And anybody who has signed the back or made a comment, you'll be notified when the comprehensive report and recommendations come forward. So, thank you. Now onward and upward for our second public meeting, which is a repeat of an earlier public meeting, and it's regarding 168 Division 227 Brock Street.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is a zoning bylaw amendment application for two properties, 168 Division Street and 227 Brock Street. The application before you tonight has had a public meeting prior to, I think it happened in January or February of this year. This is being brought forward tonight as a combined report, so both planning meeting and comprehensive report with a recommendation from staff. The purpose and effect of this application is to rezone each property. 168 Division Street is going to be rezoned for a site-specific development that would be a 6-story mixed-use commercial residential building that would contain 35 residential units and commercial at grade, and have a combination of both on-site and off-site parking. 227 Brock Street is proposed to be rezoned to amend the parking ratio for the residential building on site, as well as have some site-specific parking stall dimensions as well. 168 Division Street is located at the southwest corner of Garrett Street and Division Street, which is south of the Princess Street and Princess Street and Division Street intersection. If it's hard to see on the map, hopefully you can see where I'm outlining with the mouse the location of the property. 227 Brock Street is located on the north side of Brock Street at the end of Sydenham, next to the Memorial Street parking garage. So you can see it located right here. 168 Division Street is currently developed with an existing 2-story mixed-use building that contains both commercial at grade and residential units above. It is proposed to be demolished as part of this application for the new development. 227 Brock Street currently has an existing 3 to 3.5 story residential building. It is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It is not proposed to be altered or demolished as part of this application, but the applicant is proposing to reconfigure the existing parking lot located at the rear of the building. The proposal that's for you tonight has been modified slightly since the initial public meeting. I can quickly point out some of these modifications for you. At the public meeting earlier this year, the building did have vertical articulation that broke up the facade and massing of the building, which you can see mostly represented here by the orangey red color of the building. The first floor has been set back at grade, about 1.5 meters along both Garrett Street and the Division Street frontages. And the building of the second story was proposed to cantilever out over that story to provide some pedestrian weather protection for persons in that area. This is an image here looking west down Garrett Street from Division Street, and here would be the view of the building looking south down Division Street from Princess. This is it from the rear looking east along Garrett Street, where you can see the 1.5 meter setback and the cantilever of the building here, which would provide that pedestrian weather protection. Just to make it evidently clear, this is the first floor diagram for the building, and you can see this hatched line right here is the property boundary, and for the significant portion of this setback here, it's about 1.5 meters with a couple interjections for structural supports for that second story. The same is carried along the Division Street frontage as well. Here you can see the proposed retail space, which will front on both Garrett Street and Division Street, animating the corner, with the parking located on the ground floor in a structure down the side and the rear of the building. Bicycle parking is proposed in this garage as a stacked bicycle arrangement, and I'll get to that a little further on in the presentation. Here you can see the second story where the building will be built out to the property boundary. You can see the property boundary here again in the hatching, with the building located along those property frontages. The vertical articulations provided opportunity for private amenity space for the units, so most of the balconies, I believe 27 of the 35, will have their own private amenity space as well. In addition to that, there's a 291 square meter outdoor amenity space proposed above the parking garage, accessible from the second floor, with a common amenity space that enters out onto it, which is 54 square meters in size. With the structural requirements for the transfer slab, which you can see along here for the building, which will support the cantilever over the first floor, the building height had to be increased from the initial proposed 19.9 meters or 20 meters to 21, so that initial meter helps with that structural support for the cantilever. These are just some proposed massings of the building that were presented at the public meeting by the applicant, so you can see the 6-story massing in relation to some of the other existing development in the area. These two large towers here are the Princess Towers, and these are the Brock Street Towers. There were questions at the previous meeting about stacked bicycle parking and how it works. I'm hoping that this diagram can support the recommendation to amend the existing bicycle parking provisions to allow this configuration. The top row here actually pulls out and then down and allows a person to load a bicycle onto it, and then that would push back up and be stacked above it. So in this configuration, you can have bicycle parking both below and above, which better maximizes space in tight parking garages. 227 Brock Street, again, the existing building along Brock Street is here and not proposed to be amended or touched as part of this application. This existing parking lot in the back is going to be reconfigured to permit the 10 parking spaces that are going to be required for that development. So 5 for the existing 10-unit residential building that exists today, and 5 off-site parking spaces for 168 Division Street. A thorough policy analysis was completed as part of the planning report and is contained both in the appendices and the recommendations in the report. The application is consistent with the provincial policy statements. It's located in an urban area, and there are a mix of land uses within walking distance, and this building continues to add to that mix of an intensity of units within the area. It's on existing municipal services, supported by active transportation as well as transit. And the transportation and land use considerations were integrated at all stages of this planning process. Each property is located within a different official plan designation. 168 Division Street is designated Main Street Commercial, which supports and facilitates buildings with ground floor commercial uses and residential uses above it. 227 Brock Street is located within the Central Business District and provides for a broad range of commercial uses that support an integrated downtown area. And the use of a commercial parking lot, which is what's proposed for part of this application, is supported by that designation. One of the new items brought forward as part of this application, at the previous public meeting, the ability to ask for or request Section 37 was not known at the time. Between that time and this application, we worked with the developer to understand the increase in density as well as gross floor area on site, and we were able to calculate that, yes, Section 37 community benefits could be attained as part of this application. So the calculation revealed that we can ask for $62,000 in community benefit contributions. As part of this, we worked with Cultural Services, who Colin Wigginton is here tonight as well to answer any questions we may have on that as well. But looking at the existing public art project within the hub, which is known as the Hub Project. It is a public art project which furthers the city's public art master plan and was completed with a full consultation last fall, consulting over, I think, 300 community members in what they were looking for out of this project. Part of the considerations for public benefit are contained within the official plan as to how we can consider it and where it will be applied. And one of the key aspects is that the benefit is applied to the area of the proposed development. So the Section 37 community benefit would be applied here with a public art mural that's on one of the walls of the building, and I'll show you that in a moment. And part of this process is under Section 37 that the public must be consulted as part of any Section 37 contributions, but it doesn't specify how. And the process which planning staff have proposed tonight is that the public consultation process is through the combined public meeting and comprehensive report, and that we are piggybacking off of an existing public art project which has had extensive community consultation to this point. This is the wall that would face south down Division Street. There are existing 1- and 2-story buildings located along this area, but the large party wall between this site and the adjacent site presents itself as a prime opportunity for community benefits for public art. When looking north on Division Street from Brock, the proposed building would sit high above this intersection right here and would present a large opportunity for this type of public art. It's not uncommon to see this application in other urban centers where public art can be obtained. This is an example from the city of Ottawa in the West End, where public art was put on a blank party wall between a building and a property to help liven the intersection during the time that that party wall is present. There are several site-specific zoning amendments required for 168 Division Street, all of which are listed here and contained within the bylaw. So we're looking to regulate a minimum amount of gross floor area, a maximum residential density, which includes a cap on the number of units and number of bedrooms and their location on the property. We're locking in the ground floor height for the overhang at about 4.1 meters, so that can't be brought down, so it creates an open and lively public space there at grade. Locking in the building height, all the required yards and setbacks, things like lot coverage, the parking ratio, a reduced parking stall dimension, which is consistent with what the city has been approving with a lot of new developments, bicycle parking, amenity space, the loading space, and the community benefits. The zoning amendments for 227 Brock Street are a bit less, looking at the parking ratio and the parking stall dimensions. At the initial public meeting, we received some comments about how the bicycle parking will function and how stacked bicycle parking would look, and I've provided a bit of an overview on that tonight. One of the requests was that the Garrett Street frontage be made more pedestrian friendly. The initial proposal had the first floor built right up to the property line at a 0-meter setback. By widening out to 1.5 meters, we've expanded that public realm to almost 3 meters in width from curb to face of building. There are elevators proposed for the building, and all the drawings that have come forward now have clearly labeled that to alleviate any confusion about how the building is accessed. And we had a question about concerns about traffic and snow storage at 227 Brock Street, which I believe is already a concern with the initial 10 parking spaces that are back there now. But that is an item that we will be reviewing through the site plan control application for the development. So the recommendation that will come forward at the time of the comprehensive report is a positive staff recommendation to approve the development as presented to you tonight, as well as the Section 37 community benefits, as the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the official plan, and represents good land use planning. Just to let you know, in addition to, we have received one additional piece of correspondence which was forwarded to clerks, which outlined questions about how Section 37 was how it was being consulted to the public, as well as some concerns about, let me just grab that correspondence quickly, about the walking distance between the proposed building and the off-site parking at 227 Brock Street, and were there any concerns, and there was some concern about any amendments that might happen to 227 Brock Street given its heritage designation. Public notice tonight was given in accordance with the Planning Act, so property owners were mailed a notice of tonight's meeting within 120 meters of each property, and that was placed in the Kingston Wig standard, and signs were posted on the property. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have here forward.
Thank you. We'll turn to the committee first. Yes, Councillor Connelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few questions about justification for some of the proposed reliefs, particularly as it pertains to setbacks. The front setback is supposed to be 4.5 meters, and the back setback is supposed to be 9.9 meters. And if I'm reading the report right, and if I've heard you correctly, we're asking for 0 on the back and only 1.5 on the front. So that's about 10 meters difference. And something that I hear from residents very often is that they're not opposed to such development. In fact, they think that it's good for the city, as do I. That type of density, and even the design of this building, in my own taste, is quite nice with the articulation that you've mentioned. But it's going to loom large over the sidewalk, and it will have no setback at the back. So what is the planning justification for essentially ignoring those requirements entirely?
Through you, Mr. Chair, for a multi-use building is meters of grade. All other buildings, commercial otherwise, I think are 0 and nil. So this is a mixed-use building, and what we're considering here is a more urbanized frontage. So setting a building back 4.5 meters would eat into a lot of the developable area on this site, A, and B, not help to reinforce the street wall in that area and create a more urbanized center in the hub district. When looking at the rear lot line setback, for the first floor, it is at 0 meters to facilitate this parking structure, and it does things twofold. It encloses the parking structure to buffer it from the adjacent residential uses and provides that opportunity for the outdoor amenity space for this structure, which is evident here on the second floor. The building, the actual residential portion, from the second floor up to the sixth floor is set back 10 meters or over 10 meters from that rear lot line to help alleviate any sort of privacy concerns that residents to the rear might have or intrusive overlook concerns.
All right, I'll add that for now. Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just going back to 227 Brock Street, because we got a letter in our package. So the existing parking lot behind 227 Brock Street, you said was just going to be reconfigured. The building at 227 Brock Street will be left standing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. Heritage staff have also reviewed this application, and given what might be proposed there, Heritage staff have said that a heritage permit may be required should anything other than maybe just a parking lot rearrangement be required.
Okay, thank you. And about the community benefits. So where it was that 300 people provided input, that was not specific to this building, it was more the hub project, right? That was Princess Street, Division Street area. Is that where the 300 people came in? And was this project actually recommended for consult, or was it just 300 people said, yeah, like, we should do art in that area?
I will let Cultural Services speak to that first part, but I believe the second part, Section 37, and correct me if I'm wrong, the hub project also recognized that community art could be developed in the hub project through Section 37 contributions for developments happening in the area. But I will turn to Colin to speak to the process for the hub project.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So the project that we've done around public consultation in relation to the hub project has started in September, continued through March of this year, and it was through those opportunities that we've connected with about 350 people in the community. And the focus was on how we could bring public art into the intersection of Princess and Division Street. But through the findings, we didn't specifically address this proposal, but one of the outcomes of that consultation was that people would like to see the impact of that work start to have more of a ripple effect out across Division Street, up Princess Street. And so this building being in close proximity to that certainly makes sense in terms of what the public was calling for in terms of activating and improving the experience of that intersection.
Thank you. And to follow up for the mural wall then, right? Would that be a permanent mural, or would it be a mural we would have for a couple of years and then we could change it to another picture on the mural?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So my colleague Danica Lougheed has been working with Mr. Barr and the developers to explore what's possible. This would be a new initiative for us to actually work in concert with private developers, so it would be a public-private partnership. The work that would be created would be one that would be instigated and paid for by the developer, and so would belong to them. So my understanding is that we would bring our expertise to the table in terms of facilitating the process of artist selection and the creation of the work, but it would belong to the developer. So I would assume that it would be up to them and it would be their choice to make it a permanent piece, though it is my understanding that the main thing that would probably impact it in time is further development in and around that building that might ultimately mask the work.
And just one last question about them. For the $62,000, so the $62,000, will there be any leftover money, or will the permanent wall equal the $62,000? I'm just wondering if there's any, like maybe the wall will cost $45,000 and then there'd be leftover money that we can put towards like a fund for affordable housing or one other community benefit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to my understanding at this point, there hasn't been a budget finalized within that $62,000 envelope that's been identified. Our conversations have been strictly based on the components that would be required in terms of project administration, artist fees, creation of the work, and then funds that would support its continuing maintenance.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question about the 227 Brock Street parking, which you did cover pretty well. When someone wants to park at the moment in their front yard, they are required to find parking within 60 meters of their home. Why is this different? Since it's much more than 60 meters between 168 Division and 227 Brock.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the zoning bylaw does outline for residential zones through 8499 that you can provide or you can find off-site parking within 60 meters of your property, and that's what's regulated by the zone. The official plan has a consideration that says walking distance is up to 600 meters, and as part of this application, the walking distance here is about 450 to 500 meters. The applicant has requested that the parking be located here to A, use an existing parking facility within the city that might otherwise be underutilized, and B, it is still within considered walking distance as per our official plan, and that's why they've sought that amendment.
Okay, fair enough. Follow-up question, but not on. To do with the public art, it wasn't entirely clear to me what protects the public's interest in this over time. Is there an agreement between the developer and the city? If it's owned by the developer, can the developer just change it or build right next to it and basically obliterate it? In which case, the community benefit disappears. What protects that community benefit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the focus areas in the public art master plan and the public art policies approved by council is the opportunity to explore and develop these kinds of relationships with the private sector, and it would be controlled by an agreement between the city and the developer in terms of how it would play out both in the short term and the long term. So that would be something that would be worked out as that kind of contract agreement.
Okay, and that in place over time. So we have some protection.
Through you, that would certainly be my understanding.
Sure, thank you. And when it says here that Section 9037 community benefits is not large enough to consider affordable housing options, well, I know that doesn't pay for, maybe half of one bedroom unit. Nevertheless, how does the community benefits operate differently than parkland dedication, where we take the parkland dedication, we apply it where it's necessary? Is it done differently under Section 37? And if so, how?
Through you, Mr. Chair, parkland dedicated and Section 37 are two different parts of the Planning Act and are both regulated differently as such. Section 37 is a bit more of a negotiation based on the uplift value of the property, based on the increases in height, density, and gross floor area. So it is a bit of a different process in order to consider the calculation to arrive at that number. Our official plan goes a little bit further to specify areas which we would like to see community benefits applied. So some of those areas include affordable housing, environmental initiatives, parkland dedication beyond what's required, the provisions for public art, and so on and so forth. I think there's about a list of maybe 12 different considerations for community benefits, and public art is one of them as part of this. And just to reiterate what we said earlier, is that we're kind of piggybacking and building off of and helping to further the hub project initiative with this project through these Section 37 monies.
Good, thanks. That was a good explanation. Thanks. I'll be able to tell us now. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really just sort of confused on how you're calculating the community benefit of $67,000. I'm not sure which version of the community benefit plan you're using, whether it's 2007, 2008, 2009, or 19 rather. And as far as public art is concerned, the demonstration that you put up from Ottawa, I guess it's beauty's an eye of the beholder because I didn't really find that very attractive. So my concern is we put up another building and intensify that section and have another tower that goes up. Is there any envisioned, like, to me, the community benefit for the size of that magnitude doesn't seem to be sufficient enough as a quantity. I would have preferred to have seen electrified parking spaces. I would have preferred to see, guaranteed income aspect of rental units for sure. And I especially being downtown, that hub. And, should that art be hidden by a future development, would that benefit of $67,000 or potentially more then be reverted back to another benefit for more trees or more, I don't see putting up a picture, I don't see the benefit. I don't see how it impacts the lives of the citizens, honestly.
Through you, Mayor, the calculation for Section 37 is detailed in the report. There is a chart under the Community Benefits Act section, which outlines how we arrived at the dollar value, and it's the same process we used for several projects on Princess Street, so it follows the same sort of valuation formula. When considering taste or not, the project presents an opportunity to advance a project that the city has seen that has some value through the hub project and the public art master plan. And the call for submissions for this project might vary differently depending on how it's done and what's actually constructed there. But it's staff recommendation that this is of some value and of some benefit to the area. And as part of this project, that's what we had to consider. When we were trying to arrive at that understanding, we looked at what the project was already proposing. It's proposing a 6-story mid-rise mixed-use building, which is something that we're trying to encourage here in the city, and it is a stick frame built building, which from an environmental and ecological perspective and fitting in with our climate emergency helps to further the built form aspect of that climate emergency by looking at alternative building construction other than concrete formed buildings. And this is a different project. It's a rental project that's being brought forward. It's not one of the higher end condos that we've seen come forward in some of our mixed use developments. So this is already offering a different type of units and a different type of built form and a different type of construction material, which kind of leans into a few of the city's key aspects around environmental sustainability and increasing housing supply to help combat our low vacancy rate. So when considering all of the items that this building put forward, the community benefits aspect and the timing of the hub project really kind of dovetailed nicely together. Then that's why the recommendation come forward as is tonight.
Thank you. Would you take the chair, please?
I take the chair and recognize.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, particularly because this statutory meeting is leading into a recommendation, which I'll make a couple of comments now, but I'll reserve some of what I want to say till we get to that portion. First of all, we did indeed have a public meeting, and there were a number of issues that were brought forward that were of concern. Setback was one, the total density was another, the parking issues were another. I haven't seen much substantial addressing of those issues in the new comprehensive report, which I find a little bit troubling. I want to go, and also there are so many requests for relief in this, and which begs the question, are we approving something that doesn't fit within the footprint of this project? So if you don't mind, I will just go over a couple of these. Maximum height, the relief is modestly an additional 3 meters. The maximum lot coverage is 100% lot coverage. There's 123 dwelling units per net hectare. I was trying to, because it's divvied up so much, I'm curious about what is the total number of parking spaces that are being provided residentially and the total number that are being provided for commercial. If you could answer that, that would be helpful. Yes.
Looking at the zoning compliance chart, so there are 2 being provided for the commercial uses and 15 provided for the residential uses.
And that's total both on-site and off-site?
Correct, so it'll be 17 total for both on-site and off-site.
Okay, so we have 123 units residential, and I've drank the Kool-Aid on the idea that in the downtown core, where you have lots of rapid transit, we don't need 1 parking space for every unit of housing. But what we're talking about is 123 dwelling units with 15 parking spaces.
Sure, so can I just provide
And if I could just finish this off, and then, and we're going from 1 parking space for every 28 square meters of leasable floor area, commercial, non-residential, to 1 parking space for every 150 square meters of leasable floor space. Maybe if there's some way you can convince me that that's going to be adequate parking both commercially and residentially, because even if we move students in there, which I'm sure is the intent, that's still a very, very low number of parking spaces.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with the commercial parking spaces. There are 2 proposed for the commercial unit. The rate of 1 parking space for every 150 square meters of leasable floor area is the rate that has been approved for the Williamsville Street projects. So the 10-story buildings along Williamsville Street, like 575, and the other ones there have had that rate. If you look at where this property is in location to the downtown, if it was on the opposite side of Division Street, so the east side, the requirement for commercial parking spaces would be 0 across the board. This just happens to be on the west side of the street. And with the parking rate of 1 per 150, it's common and applicable to what we've seen in other mixed-use projects in this area of the city.
Yeah. I'll try not to sound like a scold, but it always frustrates me when people refer to the Williamsville corridor plan, which is very site-specific for the Princess Street, Upper Princess Street corridor, and they want to apply those standards in an area that is very, very different. I walk that area or drive that area every day of my life, and the park, it isn't like Princess Street where there is available parking. There is nothing on that street that isn't already dedicated to a commercial operation. So the idea that you'd have that little commercial parking is going to create some issues, I believe.
Would you like me to continue to speak about the residential
aspects? Yeah, please do.
Sure. With regards to the maximum density, so the maximum density as regulated by this zone, the parent zone, is 123 dwelling units per net hectare. The development that's proposed today doesn't propose 123 units, it proposes 35 units, which for 15 parking spaces devoted to 35 units, that residential parking rate is 0.42 parking spaces per residential unit, and that has been supported by the applicant's parking study. If you're looking at the zoning compliance table, which I think you were looking at earlier, it breaks down that density for what is currently regulated by the zone and what's being proposed, given the fact that they're proposing 35 units. So I apologize if that chart was a little confusing.
Thank you. The other thing is amenity area space. You're asking for substantial relief for that amount. You are, and I applaud the 54 square meters common indoor amenity space. But given the density of this project, the requirement would normally be, as recorded here, 291, almost 292 square meters common outdoor amenity space. What frustrates me here is that there's zero outdoor amenity space. There's full lot coverage in an area that's already tremendously dense. And that's such a large relief that's being requested. It strikes me that it begs the question, is this too much density for this small a footprint? And we can talk about that a little bit when we get to the comprehensive report. The other thing that, two other things, and then I'm going to let other people speak honest. The barrier-free parking dimensions, I'm on MAC, the Municipal Accessibilities Committee, so I have some concerns when there's a large number of those in order to squeeze in the amount of parking you are proposing. And are you meeting the required number for the 200 and some units? Is there we aren't asking for relief in the number, we're only asking for relief in the size, which I still find problematic. But is that accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the application doesn't propose to reduce the number of required accessible parking spaces because it's based on the required parking, not the as of right density of the zone. So it specifically looks at the number of units proposed.
I mentioned on a different application some time ago, I will not vote for a project that doesn't meet the required number of accessible parking spaces.
Understandable.
So that is an issue. So the other very quick question I want to ask has to do with the whole idea of community benefit. It's my understanding under the community benefit as prescribed in the Planning Act and in our official plan, there's a commitment to neighborhood consultation. Okay? And the way I read that, it's neighborhood consultation specific to the community benefit. And I totally support the Hub project, and I totally support outdoor public art. And I would vote for any public art that comes through council for approval. I really wish we had public art on that big ugly white wall on the Princess Towers, but that's a different issue, I know. But I guess my concern is, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the public meeting that was held some months ago for the Hub project was not specific, or was not specific to this community benefit. It was specific to what the community wanted for that Hub project. And I totally support that. And I would vote tomorrow to put money in the budget to make that happen. But I'm concerned that there wasn't the community and the immediate neighborhood, as I read our official plan and the Planning Act, should have required never took place. Could you correct me if I'm wrong?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. The Planning Act and our official plan specify that the public must be consulted as part of any community benefit requests. The public meeting tonight, as well as the comprehensive report and the advertisement that went out for tonight's meeting, all specified that community benefits were to be discussed this evening. The purpose of this additional public meeting we're having right now was to consult on the community benefit aspect and hear from any member of the public that may wish to speak on it tonight. There's no requirement that there has to be specific neighborhood consultation under the Planning Act or our official plan, but the public should be consulted is what is specified.
Then I will comment that even in that scenario, if this public meeting is to discuss community benefit, why would we 10 minutes later, after we get that input from the community tonight, why would we 10 minutes, 20 minutes later be asked to vote on a plan that obviously doesn't include whatever community benefit we hear here tonight? So usually I ask this question, so I'll ask it again. Why specifically, what is so time sensitive that we have to deal with this right after the public meeting? And I mean from a city perspective or a process perspective, not from a developer's perspective. Why is this time sensitive from a city planning perspective?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll start with the first part of your question, which relates to the community benefit public process which we're engaged in this evening. The process that's been brought forward for this aspect is covered under the Planning Act and our official plan. However, when we're considering it this evening, the reason we've brought forward this recommendation tonight and holding this public meeting prior to the comprehensive report was to hear any public feedback we may get on the proposal to use the Section 37 monies for public and community art. Staff are confident in the recommendation that's put forward this evening that this is an appropriate use of the Section 37 monies with regards to this project and the hub area. And it's always the discretion of council and planning committee that you can choose to approve or defer based on what you hear tonight. So if we have a groundswell or a couple comments that come forward with regards to the Section 37 monies, that can be considered, but staff are confident in the recommendation put forward tonight that it is appropriate and that it is good planning and that it represents a compatible style of infill and built form.
With all due respect, I'm not sure that addresses, maybe you're about to, why this is time perspective from a city planning perspective.
Looking at it from the time-sensitive portion, the applicant went through pre-application in 2017 and submitted an application in 2018. We've been working with them for the past 9 months, I believe, at this point, to move the application to this point. We're in a summer session, so there's going to be two parts to my answer. One is going to be about timing, and the second is going to be about appropriateness. With regards to timing, the summer session does have a compressed council schedule, so in order to move the appeals period along for this, there's only one council meeting in July, so that's why we are recommending that the decision tonight move forward to the July 9th council meeting and not the August 15th, or whenever it is in August council meeting. Looking at it from the planning perspective, it's planning staff's perspective that this is the type of development that we want to encourage in the city. This is the 6-story mixed-use mid-rise style of development that I think we've been looking at for a while now and looking to have come forward. This is both positive from the mix of uses that's happening on site, it's rental, it's going to be a different style of built form for the area that could help catalyst a change maybe in this area. And looking at it from the environmental aspect as well, this is a 6-story timber frame building that we're getting, which is also something that we are, I think, wanting to encourage more of in the city. So from an appropriateness of the planning recommendations tonight, those are some of the key aspects we considered when trying to move this application forward.
I think because I wandered into the comprehensive discussion, some of your answers are more related to that. So we'll move on from that, I believe. So, any further? Oh,
You want the chair back?
I do indeed. Thank you.
You can have it.
Any further questions from the committee? I will open this up. If you could comment on any correspondence we've received specific to this meeting.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did cover that in my presentation, but just in the mindfulness of thoroughness, we did receive one written communication tonight that I have been made aware of. It was submitted this afternoon that spoke about the process for community benefits as well as the appropriateness of the walking distance between 168 Division and 227 Brock, and questions about whether there were changes to the designated building at 227 Brock. And I believe I've covered answers to all of those in the presentation and comments here for.
And there was no other correspondence we've received?
We have received no other correspondence.
Okay, thank you. I will now open it up to members of the public, and again, there are microphones here. Anybody who wishes to speak, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is John Grenville. I live in Williamsville District at 24 Jenkins Street. I've had an interest in the community benefit process since 2013, when 3 developments in Williamsville District were given increased height and density bonuses. In return for the increased height and density for these 3 developments, the property owners were required to, and I quote directly from the bylaw, establish a high quality of architectural design and human scale development consistent with the city's long-term vision for the area. This was completely contrary to a prior report to Council on Community Benefits, which clearly stated that, and I quote again, by accepting good architecture and or good design as eligible community benefits, the city would be signaling that lower standards are appropriate in developments where density bonusing is not used, and this is definitely not the case. That triggered my interest. That was in 2013. That was the first instances, I believe, that community benefits have been provided for by the City of Kingston. In April of 2016, a presentation was made to Planning Committee, who was informed that the Planning Department was proceeding with the development of procedures to guide planning staff on the implementation of the community benefits section of the official plan. I personally participated in a number of public meetings, a small group consultation session with planning staff, and a meeting and a direct meeting with the recently departed manager for planning policy. I've read, reread, and commented on various versions of the community benefit guidelines in 2016, in 2017, and in 2018. The planning department has had what I am told is the final version of the community benefit guidelines since September of 2018. But as far as I know, it's never been presented to the planning committee. I am told that the reason for this is that it is being held back until the Mayor's task force on housing is completed. I don't understand or know why the guidelines aren't implemented and then amended if needed. Nonetheless, I was told that the planning department was following these community benefit guidelines for all applicable developments, despite their not being presented to the planning committee nor approved by council. However, tonight's public meeting to consider the community benefits leads me to conclude that there are no consistent guidelines, and I hesitate somewhat to use this term, but it appears to be a sort of a Wild West and inconsistent approach to determining community benefits. I say this because the unapproved guidelines refer to the need to, and I'm quoting directly from these guidelines, to identify a candidate list of community benefits early in the review of the development proposal. This list will be presented at the statutory public meeting that accompanies the Planning Act application seeking additional height and density. Accordingly, they should have been presented at February's public meeting. The feedback received from the public through this Planning Act process will be used to inform the identification and the evaluation of community benefit options. The process that was followed in this instance did not develop a candidate list for community benefits. There was no presentation of the candidate list for public comment, and consequently public input was not informed, has not informed the recommended community benefit. I fully recognize that this is a statutory public meeting at which interested members of the public are being asked for their input. I guess my question is, why waste everyone's time on what is seen as a rubber stamp on the staff recommendations? Except for the fact that I personally don't know when to quit on a subject like this, I would not be here to comment on a flawed process, let alone come to offer alternatives. Over the past 18 months, 2 height and density bonuses have been given.
Excuse me, 30 seconds.
Thank you. As you will have surmised by now, I have been frustrated by how community benefits have been handled and how little community consultation has been conducted for what is supposed to be community benefit, with the emphasis on community. What about Garrett and Division? The short answer is, I don't know. Where's the community list? It's like being told you can vote in a communist country, but when you go to vote, there's only one name on the ballot. I support the Public Art Initiative, but question the community benefit process. The longer answer is, Planning Committee should refer the report back to the Planning Department with a request for follow-up action that's in line with the community benefit guidelines that are languishing in somebody's file after more than 3 years since the first presentation on the matter to the Planning Committee. I don't believe that this prevents consideration of the draft zoning bylaw amendment, but it would allow for consideration of options for the community benefit rather than just the one option as currently proposed, bearing in mind that I do support the Public Art Initiative at the Hub. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, and I do believe we have a copy of your presentation. Excellent.
As one, thank you.
Any other member of the public wish to? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon, back again. Thank you for your presentation tonight. I think it is improved over the first version. I'm going to say that I'm generally supportive, but I do have some concerns, some of which have already been covered, so I'll do my best to not repeat the points in the interest of time. You are asking for a lot of variances. And in a nutshell, I believe that there's too much residential project for the footprint that you've got. Okay? One that hasn't come up yet is the shadow solar study. And I don't think you're asking for any amendments there. I went through the chart on that. So would it be correct to assume that you're fully compliant with the requirements on that? This is in Williamsville District, but I'm a bit confused as to whether it's actually part of the Williamsville Main Street study, because it is set about a block or so to the south of Princess Street. Okay. Now, this is a bit of a tech question here on some numbers. How many residential bedrooms are in the currently existing buildings on this site? And how many bedrooms are there in this project? So that question goes together with my next question. Assuming that this project does get approved in something similar to its current, version, from the time it would go through the planning committee and then to council, how long would it take your proponents to actually construct the project? Is this like a 6-month project or a year, or, because we're gonna be losing those units, right? We're gonna be expanding in the long term, but in the short term, we're losing those units, and I'm concerned about that. Okay, and I will go along with what my neighbor friend just said on the so-called community benefits. My suggestion is that affordable housing in 1 or 2 units is preferable at this time to public art. And I'll say that even saying that I do support public art. I didn't take part in the consultation, but I have some ideas. Okay, and then my final point is that with the parking, as the chair was saying,
30 seconds.
yes, I'm going to suggest respectfully that you look into an arrangement with Metro, which is about a block away, and they have large time slots with large vacancies on that space. Okay, so that's my points. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further member of the public wish to speak? Yes. And if you can identify yourself.
So my name is Mark Tao. I'm the agent for the applicant. So this being a combined statutory and public meeting, we did not give a presentation to date because we didn't believe one was necessary. So I guess I'm speaking more as an applicant's agent at the public meeting more so than necessarily a member of the public commenting on it. I will still try to be brief, but I may go over the 5 minutes. But I believe as part of the public meeting,
I'm sorry. I just have to say you had every opportunity as the agent to speak at the beginning as an agent of the plan. So please keep it within the 5 minutes, okay? Because right now, I hate to say this, but you're operating as a member of the public, but so it is the 5-minute rule, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
And so I'm speaking to try to provide answers to questions from the committee. So if there are follow-up questions that I've not answered, then I'm happy to answer those as well. So with respect to some of the concerns that were expressed so far, there's concerns about reduced parking and the appropriateness of that. So I'd like to follow up on a couple of those. So a parking study was done that assessed the appropriateness of the parking ratio, which was reviewed and accepted by staff with respect to the residential and the commercial parking ratio. The commercial parking ratio is what's been accepted elsewhere for very comparable developments in the downtown. It's important to note that this site is across the street from the CBD. It's designated Main Street Commercial, which is the same designation that applies to Williamsville, so it's within that same main hub of the downtown. So with respect to the appropriateness of the parking ratio, on that basis, we believed it was appropriate, and as did the parking study that was done. With respect to the amenity space reduction, within the downtown core, so across the street, the requirement for amenity space is 10 square meters, as it is along Princess Street. We're proposing something in between the 10 and the 18.5 required elsewhere. As part of the analysis that we did for staff, we demonstrated through diagrams and written submissions how the amenity space provided was functional and usable in terms of the type of space, the variety of space. There is outdoor space as well on the upper deck of the parking garage, so that's the large outdoor space that's provided. With respect to barrier-free parking dimensions, we do meet the requirement for the number of barrier-free spaces, not based on a reduced ratio, but based on the standard requirement before a reduction is asked for. So we do fully comply with that requirement. In terms of dimensions, they're as per AOTA requirements. No reductions are being required or requested for that. With respect to the setbacks, whether they're appropriate in the building form, as I noted, it's within the Main Street commercial designation, which is what applies to Williamsville. It's also in the core of the city in terms of the downtown. So those designations would allow for heights of what we're proposing, 0 meter setbacks, 1 meter setbacks from the front yard, which we are providing. So the built form is consistent with what else would be supported in that designation in that area. With respect to the zoning, as everyone knows, the zoning bylaws are out of sync with the official plan. They're all 30+ year zoning bylaws for the most part. So where the official plan allows for built forms of what we're proposing, the zoning bylaw typically is out of sync and doesn't recognize what the official plan allows, whether it's density, built form, massing, etc. So though we are requesting relief from the zoning itself is quite archaic and not consistent with the official plan. With respect to the questions from Mr. Dixon, currently there are 6 units and 11 bedrooms on the site, and we are proposing 35 units and about 100 bedrooms. Construction timeline is about 12 to 14 months. And with respect to shadowing, there wasn't any relief requested from that, though it's dealt with through the building envelope. And with respect to community benefits, the owners met with staff and with the hub project organizers to discuss what could be done. The community benefit value is based on a calculation that's provided by the city in terms of the uplift value of the additional density. So a value has been determined. Where that value goes or is applied to is subject to a future community benefits agreement that would be implemented through a future site plan before site plan's applied. So if there's a desire that the community benefit amount is used for something other than the hub project, that opportunity still exists. It's the set amount derived from the density increase that is essentially been established. Whether it goes to the hub project or some other benefit, I think that opportunity still exists. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll go back into the committee. Oh, I'm sorry. There are a number of questions that perhaps hadn't been answered yet. So go ahead.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, looking at the public comments, the questions about the community benefits process to date, Ms. Agarwal will be able to answer a bit better than I have. She's a lot more well-versed in it. So I'm going to look to her for that and then come back to me to answer a few questions on here.
Thank
Yes.
you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I wanted to specifically answer the question regarding the proposed community benefit guidelines that staff had been working on and why they haven't yet been implemented. The province has revised Section 37 of the Planning Act. So as it relates to height and or density increases, that section has been totally revamped. The changes to the Planning Act have received royal assent. However, they have not been implemented yet. So, so based on the changes to the Planning Act, staff have more work to do before those type of guidelines are finalized. Section 37 increase in height and or density is now being replaced with what the province is calling a community benefits charges bylaw. There will be more details being released by the province through proposed regulations. At this time, we don't have much information about what's going to be included in that. However, with the changes anticipated soon, the proposed guidelines that we had been working on won't be coming forward as proposed, as we do need to make changes to them based on the changes that the province is making.
Thank you. We'll allow him to finish, then we'll all have an opportunity for a kick at the can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just to answer some of the final questions that we received from the public, there was concerns that there might be too much residential density for this project given the footprint. Staff, through the review of this application, are satisfied that the built form is appropriate as well as the proposed density on site. The proposed density is supported by a number of studies which were submitted as part of the application. the servicing report, the transportation study, the parking study, the urban design report, and the planning report are all supportive of the project before us tonight, and staff have accepted that evidence as part of this project.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you address the questions? I think what you're addressing is the comprehensive report right now, which I'm sorry. I'm the one who's falling asleep here. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead.
That's okay. It's getting late. With regards to the shadow solar study, that was submitted as part of the urban design report, and it has been deemed satisfactory for the project, and it was updated as part of any built form changes, so that's all regulated through the built form and has been deemed to be satisfactory. This area is not within the Williamsville Main Street C4 commercial zone. However, this is within the Princess Street corridor as outlined on Schedule 2 of the official plan, which deals with city structure, so it is part of the Princess Street corridor. I think this was already answered, but there are 35 units with a proposed maximum of 100 bedrooms as part of this development. The mix of units is between 2 and 4 bedrooms. The answer about how long the project is going to take has been answered, and with regards to the parking agreement with Metro, that would have to be a separate discussion the owner could have with that developer, or sorry, I guess property owner at this point, but they have secured parking on one of their own sites, so they could, with this amendment, look at any parking abilities within 450 meters of their property.
Thank you. We will now go back into the committee for final comments or questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Through you, and forgive broad, but one of the questions that's nagging me through all of the other comments that have been made tonight is why so many reliefs are required. I'm not satisfied. I asked earlier about the setbacks. It's pretty much entirely going to zero. We heard about amenity space, parking, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like this is not compatible with any of the current regulations. And so I'm wondering how it can come as a recommendation of good planning. I know that's very broad. Those are the 3 examples that are on my mind, but I think it's been threaded throughout all of the comments tonight. So if all the regulations are not being met, how can it be recommended?
Sure, and I can answer that and build off of what Mr. Tao brought up during his portion of the meeting, is that the zoning bylaw for 8499 is 30 plus years old, and our official plan is a more updated policy document, which is guiding development within the city of Kingston. And the Main Street commercial designation facilitates and encourages the type of built form that's come forward today as part of this application. So this style of building is what is being encouraged by the Main Street commercial designation. The C zone, the general C zone that's on the property now, does require some amendments in order to be able to establish this built form through the zoning bylaw. But the zoning in this application is supported by the studies which have been submitted to date and the planning evidence of Mr. Tao, the project consultant, to really outline as to why this built form is appropriate, and staff are accepting of that recommendation. And this is an appropriate style of mixed-use mid-rise buildings within both this designation and this portion of the city. It's adjacent to the central business district. It's on Division Street. It's located on an arterial, and it's supported by both active transportation, express bus services, and local bus services. So there are a lot of driving factors that both facilitate the number of units and uses on site and the built form that's being proposed.
That does context, so thank you. The follow-up is, what type of timeline should we expect, especially for 3 of the committee members, ourselves being new to council and this committee particularly? What type of timeline should we expect between updates to the official plan and zoning bylaws to follow suit? Because it seems like there's a lot of discussion around regulations that are ostensibly, or at least purportedly, not up to snuff, up to date. When does that gap close?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to defer over to Sukriti on this because she has been working on the consolidated zoning bylaw.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. We do anticipate that the second draft of the new zoning bylaw will be released sometime in 2020. We are currently working on the Central Kingston growth strategy, the recommendations of which will be incorporated in the second draft of the new zoning bylaw. The first draft of the new zoning bylaw was released a couple of years ago. With respect to your question about the official plan update, typically that is done every 5 years. The last time it was initiated was in 2015, and the official plan amendments were adopted by council in 2017. So we will be coming back to another update of the official plan in 2 years or so. Thank you.
Thank you. Third and final question about a timeline pertaining to the community benefits that we've heard about, and I appreciate the context that was given around the passage of updates to Section 37 of the Planning Act. What is the time frame on having council or this committee approve new guidelines given those changes?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. At this time, actually, like all of the municipalities within the province are awaiting the province to release proposed regulations. The province has, I think, very recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, released a summary of what they might be proposing in the regulations, and consultation on that is open until sometime in August. I don't remember the exact date. I really can't speak to the timeline that the province is looking at because they are still consulting on the proposed regulations. However, I know that the changes have received royal assent. However, they will come into effect on a date when proclaimed by the Lieutenant Governor, and we don't know that date yet. So it all depends on how far the provincial government intends on moving into making these changes, into implementing these changes. The province has indicated that it will give municipalities some time to work on a community benefit charges strategy before a municipality can adopt a community benefit charges bylaw. So that is, it's a slightly different process than how community benefits work currently. Going forward, based on the proposed changes or the proposed summary of the regulations that the province has put forward, a municipality will first have to prepare a community benefits charges strategy, which is kind of similar to the guidelines that we had been working on. And then based on that strategy, pass a community benefit charges bylaw, and only then can a municipality then ask for community benefits. At this time, the province is no longer tying community benefits to an increase in height or density. So we don't really know what exactly that would entail. I'm guessing that each municipality will have to come up with their own strategy. What the province has indicated is that through several type of Planning Act applications, including minor variances, a municipality will be able to ask for community benefits. However, that would have to be identified within that community benefit strategy. So I really have an idea as to the timeline.
Okay, it sounds like it'll be many months. So, for example, hypothetically, if we were to defer a project before us with community benefits in anticipation of getting guidelines that we could then use to assess a project with a community benefit, it could be a long time before that is actually an appropriate strategy.
Sorry, through Chair. I remember reading January 1st, 2021 in their proposed regulations with respect to when a municipality, that's like the deadline when a municipality would need to pass a bylaw. So yes, it is quite a ways. But with respect to the actual implementation of the Planning Act changes, that would be sooner than that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hill.
So comments are accepted? This is the kind of conversation in my mind that makes the citizens of Kingston go crazy. I mean, we have here in front of us a perfectly acceptable example of intensification that meets a whole bunch of needs that we've identified over and over again. We're talking about potentially deferring this because of parking spots. We just declared a climate emergency. We should be encouraging that there only be 2 parking spots and they both be accessible and built to the right size. I mean, this kind of, you know, the regulations that we're working with here, the guidelines that we're working with here, apply to a street that existed 50 years ago. It doesn't apply to the fact that this is an extension of a core that's expanding outward. This is a perfect example of a downtown core residential development. It meets all of the expectations that we've outlined as a council in the last few months that I've been on council. You know, the fact that we would be looking at, and not only that, but we're going to get the commercial interest to pay for public art, which I just think is wonderful. I mean, that's something that's aspirational and great. So I think what we have to do is start to look at what is this going to generate for our community. And I know we're going to have this debate in a few minutes, but I just find this kind of discussion and sort of nitpicking about some of these items to be really not a positive direction for this committee to be going in.
Thank you. Any further comments from committee? Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Perhaps I can help realize what the discussion is about. What I heard from the representative of Williamsville, first of all, first thing to say is the questions do not necessarily reflect how the committee will vote and what they think is important. But what is important is understanding there have been developments which were not particularly acceptable that have gone into Williamsville and not on Princess Street, but on adjacent streets. And I believe between the lines, that's what the councillor and the public were concerned about without baldly stating it, okay? And this was straightened out somewhat by the different designations, you know, Main Street and versus Williamsville and so on. So that was clarifying. The other things are, I mean, I can understand why people would wonder what the problem is, but in fact, I think is the community benefits section, as we found out, we don't know what the rules are, or what the guidelines are, or what their status is. So I have a question of staff. What is the legal status of the deal that's being brokered if the province hasn't indicated what they are going to allow or do?
Mr. Chair, the changes to the Planning Act regarding the new community benefits charges bylaw is not yet in effect. So we are still under the existing community benefits rule, which is the increase in height and or density.
Okay, and that apply, because that's come forward now, that will apply regardless of what the province does in the near to distant future, because it came up under the existing regulations, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's
good. So I just suspect there's a great deal more to be said, but I think that the Section 37 came forward and brought forward by the previous government and supported in some form by the present one, is because it was found by municipalities that they were getting developments for which they were not getting adequate public interest outcomes. And so this was a way of trying to get at that. And that, after all, the value to the community is in its regulations, in its planning, and what it needs to develop as a functioning, sustainable community. And I'm not talking about just Kingston, I'm talking about whatever community you might have. So I think that's why we have these discussions. And staff are living in, like the rest of us, are living in boxes within boxes within boxes. They have legal structures they have to meet. And we are wiggling around trying to find out if there's more or less. Sometimes we ask for less. We've even had cases where we have given the developer more than they asked for, and they still objected. So, you know, which was pretty crazy, as I remember, but at least some of us thought so. So this is why we have these discussions. Anyway, I'm inclined, from my perspective as a downtown councillor, I like this. For some crude and more or less some crude reasons. And they are, and plus I have some others, but the crude reason is they're going to increase the density. I'm concerned about the parking because that particular area, I've lived on Garrett Street long ago, remember what was there. It's not the same now by a long shot, but the parking's not so good, okay? So, but the real reason is the density's increased.
To interrupt you,
Yeah.
but so much of what we've talked about in this as councillors, myself included, I'm guilty as charged, has to do with the comprehensive report. And the difficulty here is that something happened tonight that I can't remember ever happening before. And that's that instead of the project planner speaking to the statutory public meeting, we had a city planner championing the project. And so the whole process awkwardly morphed into the comprehensive planning session. And so the official plan statutory public meetings as I understand them are for an opportunity for the public to hear and ask questions and for councillors to hear and ask questions. And I probably am as guilty as everybody else because what we were getting was a champion for the project in an official plan. And I owe an apology to the ICI planner who normally has an opportunity to address all of the questions. But the process is such that that kind of got off the rails and I had to treat him, according to the rules, not as a planner, but as a member of the public, but acknowledging that he was a planner. And I know that there's some members of the public who desperately wanted to say something. I saw some hands waving. There will be an opportunity when we get into the comprehensive report portion for you to be able to comment on that as well. So, unless there's a specific question, I would strongly suggest if staff want to comment on any of this, please do. But if anybody has a specific question, a statutory meeting type question, now would be the time to ask. We'll get an opportunity to express our opinions and how we're going to vote later. I saw a hand up over there, I believe. Oh, no, I'm sorry, a staff member, but you will have an opportunity. No? Okay. Councillor Chappelle.
Yeah, thank you through your chair. Just listening to the discussion on the community benefit. I want to know if the community benefit changes with new provincial direction so that it's reduced below the $67,000, what would happen? Would the new revised plan come with something less, or would it stay at the $67,000?
Sorry, I keep mixing it up. Through you, Mr. Chair, at this time, we do not know how the community benefits would be calculated. The province has indicated it will be based on the percentage of the appraised market value. However, they haven't indicated what that percentage would be. The province is currently consulting with municipalities on that. So at this time, it's hard to say what the impact of the changes would be. It may result in more or less. I cannot say at this point.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
Through the chair. I think what will happen is within the new legislation regulations that are going to come forward from the province, there'll be grandfathering clauses in it. So in other words, if a Section 37 agreement was entered into and executed prior to the new regs coming in, they would be honored. We don't know what those grandfathering provisions are exactly, like the dates, if they'll be within a 1 year, 2 year time frame, but it will honor those. That's what they've done in the past.
Thank you. Seeing no, I'm going to very happily declare this public meeting over. And some of us are tap dancing. So I'd like to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll begin the regular meeting in 5 minutes. Thank you. So I'll call the meeting to order again as soon as the clerk gets here. Paging the clerk. So I'll now call the regular planning committee meeting to order. First of all, approval of the agenda as written. Mover and seconder, Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Hill, all those in favor? With the addeds. Carried. Oh, and that was with the addeds. Confirmation of minutes from our June 20th meeting. We've all received a copy of that. I think Councillor Hutchison wants to move that, and you got to get your name in the minutes.
What do I want to move? Sorry?
Minutes from the last meeting.
I'll do that.
And Councillor Hennick just seconded to that. All those in favor? Carried. We have no delegations. Disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Yeah, it's right there from the last meeting.
I'm sorry? Yes, you have a pecuniary interest you need to declare, I believe. Good.
So this is a retro from last meeting. I, Robert Kiley of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Planning Committee Meeting 14, 2019, as I own a property adjacent to all the properties that were to be discussed.
Thank you. So, no additions, no briefings, the business portion, and then we'll get into the 3 recommendations that are before us. This portion of the meeting is open to the public. The city has initiated a new process in which members of the public will have the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on comprehensive reports presented before the Planning Committee. Those wishing to provide oral comments at this meeting will be invited to do so. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So our first order of business will be déjà vu all over again. It's the comprehensive recommendation on 227 Brock Street. So. Was there anything you wanted to say about the comprehensive?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand we've had this application tonight, and I think a lot of questions have been brought up and both answered through the public meeting portion, but I would like to reiterate one point is that the Section 37 aspect, which we discussed tonight, isn't just staff recommending it. This is something that the developer themselves has also put forward and bought into, in a sense, and that they thought it was a really good project that the city was advancing through the hub project and wanted to be a part of that. So both city staff and the developer are on side with the recommendation for the community benefits aspect. Outside of that, I think all of the questions regarding the appropriateness, the planning justification reports, the studies that have been brought forward have all been answered as part of the public meeting process.
Thank you. Any members of council wish to comment? I think we've all had a pretty thorough discussion of this already. Any further comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Just to be sure, this is the comprehensive report, right?
Yes, that's right. This is where we should
I accept.
make questions or comments.
I accept. Well, we were all over the map there. Okay, I just wanted to say in general, I support this. I do have some reservations about the parking. I don't know what the percentage is, but 0.5 has always seemed pretty low to me, and this is way lower than that. So, however, in general, if it's what we're trying to do in a low-rise fashion, which makes for a more neighborhood amenable proposal. And hopefully we can work out the community benefits part of things.
Thank you.
So, all front.
Any further? Yeah, I realize that. Let me go through this, okay? Thank you. Any further questions from council, from the committee? Yes, Councillor Chappelle.
With respect to the parking, I didn't get an answer. I noticed in my notes about whether any of the parking spots would have electric chargers for electric vehicles.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm informed by the applicant that some of the parking spaces will be electric charging. Those will be details that we will lock down through the site plan control application.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I will open the floor to the public. If anybody wishes to make a comment or ask questions, now would be the time to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, I've been impressed and I guess won over to support the project. And I have two recommendations. One of them is, what I've already said, 1 to 2 units of the 35 be designated as affordable housing. Find a way to make it happen. And to improve the parking arrangements, which have been discussed by members of the committee and the proponents, that you seek an arrangement with Metro, which is 1 block away with a lot of vacancy. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further members of the public wish to make comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll declare that public portion of the meeting over and we'll go back into committee. And in order to speak to it, we'll need a mover and a seconder. I believe Councillor Hill wants to move it. Councillor Kiley will second it. Any further questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Now we will move on to 677, 691 Gardner's Road. There's a recommendation before us. It's concerning Photen Consultants zoning bylaw.
Gardner's final, or Gardner here, sorry. This one, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna grab it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Floor's yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies, I'm covering off for one of my staff. This is their application, and I'm still getting used to your process here. So the application before you today is for a zoning bylaw amendment at 685 Gardner's Road. The proposal In particular, is requesting an amendment to the zoning bylaw to modify the existing special general commercial zone C251 to permit an auto body use shop and a workshop with some existing uses which are already permitted on the site. The applicant is also requesting permission for the outdoor storage of vehicles to facilitate the sales of vehicles and a reduction in the required yard setbacks to recognize the existing location of existing buildings and structures on the subject site. So that's a housekeeping variance. The location of the proposal, bear with me here. The site is located on the western side of Gardner's Road between Progress Avenue and Development Drive. The subject site contains 5 existing buildings. Those buildings include an automotive service shop, a retail plaza building, a 2-story office building, a warehouse, and an equipment storage shed. The official plan designation is arterial commercial and general industrial in the City of Kingston official plan. It should be noted that Schedule 3A of the official plan identifies a general industrial designation on the subject site, which is limited to a small area at the rear of the site. Bear with me, sorry, I apologize here. 133, 135. Okay. The property is an irregularly shaped lot with a large portion of the site extending southwards behind the adjacent commercial plaza located at 645 Gardner's Road. The site has an area of approximately 45,000 square meters, 11 acres, and 183 meters of frontage along Gardner's Road. Proposed development. As previously mentioned, the proposed development is asking to add 2 additional uses to the zone. An automotive body shop and outdoor storage, along with recognition of existing side yard and parking variances. Previously mentioned, the zoning bylaw has this designated as C251. The aforementioned uses are being asked to be added as permitted uses. During the public correspondence, there was questions regarding certain issues around the, fumbling with my sheets here, around questions. One was maintaining the grass between the sidewalk and the road. That area is not part of the development application, it's part of the public roadway. Will existing businesses be displaced? No, they will not be displaced. Will existing building facades be changed? The proponent has advised that they will be changed and upgraded. Is there a request for reduced setbacks? Only recognizing ones that were already existing and are to come into compliance with the existing zoning. Why the reduced setback for the north entrance? Because it's already an existing entrance. Snow storage will be dealt with through the site plan application process, as well as the stormwater management. just a listing of the modifications that have been asked for under the zoning provision. So staff are recommending additional requested uses and setback reductions to recognize the existing development, and because it will not result in an adverse impact on the surrounding built form. The additional uses, as previously mentioned, being a workshop and an automotive body shop and an automotive center, will enhance the economic viability of the subject property. The proposed zoning bylaw complies with the provincial policy statement and official plan and constitutes good land use planning. Staff are recommending approval of this application for a zoning bylaw amendment for the property.
Thank you. We had a very thorough public meeting, and I know that there weren't a lot of questions raised at that time. What was our did we have receive any correspondence?
There
or
was
phone
no
calls?
further correspondence since that meeting, Chair.
Thank you. I will turn to the committee then. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we will go to the public if there are any questions. Seeing none, mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hill, Councillor Kiley. All those in favor? I think Councillor Chappelle raised his hand there as well. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And our last one is a final plan of condominium, and that's recommendation is before us. Thank you. Sorry to keep you up this late. It's always a problem being the last on the agenda. So.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Planning Committee, staff, colleagues, and members of the public. My name is Lindsay Lambert, and I'm a planner with the city's Planning Services Group. And I'm here this evening to present the staff recommendation on an application for final plan of condominium for a property located at 1005 to 1015 Terra Verde Way. The proposed condominium is for a 22-unit stacked townhouse development that is currently under construction in the city's West End. Subject site is located on the northwestern edge of the Cataraqui North neighborhood and secondary plan in the official plan. The subject block within the plan of subdivision is in the hatched area on the location plan on this slide. And is located south of Terra Verde Way and west of Centennial Drive. So in the presentation, I've included a couple of slides of photos of the subject property. These photos were taken earlier today showing the development currently under construction. This view is taken from the east side of Centennial Drive looking southwest. And this view is taken from the west side of Centennial Drive looking north. In terms of the official plan designation of the property, in 2005, Council approved an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for this site and the wider area to the north and south. And the subject lands are a block within that registered plan of subdivision. The site is designated business commercial in the Cataraqui North secondary plan of the official plan and forms a site-specific policy area in the official plan as well. The official plan amendment permits a portion of the site to be used as high-density residential. In terms of the existing zoning, the site falls within zoning bylaw 97-102, which is the bylaw specific to the Cataraqui North neighborhood. The overall MU120 special zone permits a total of 22 townhouse units with a maximum height of 17 meters. The zoning bylaw amendment also created an open space zone for the lands to the south, which are comprised of open space, a storm pond block, and a park block. So this is just a summary of the previous Planning Act applications that the site has been subject to prior to the final plan of condominium application. So following the approval of the official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision in 2015, the applicant then filed for final plan of subdivision. That was approved in 2018. The plan and the agreement were registered in that year as well. And there was a pre-servicing agreement that the developer entered into with the city to permit the developer to go ahead with the construction of roads and servicing for the overall development. One of the conditions of the subdivision agreement was that each of the developable blocks would be subject to site plan control. Block number 7, which is the subject property, was the first to come forward in terms of a site plan control application. Approval was issued through delegated authority in 2018, and the agreement was registered a little bit later in July as well of that year. This is a slide showing the registered plan 13M114 for the final plan of subdivision. Block 7 is the subject property. Directly abutting Block 7 is Block 9, which has been dedicated to the municipality for a future park block, public park. This slide shows the approved site plan drawing, which is registered on title, regulating things such as landscaping, servicing, site functionality, waste, exterior cladding, parking, noise, exterior lighting, and amenity space. And the municipality is in receipt of securities for grading, paving, and landscaping related to the site plan. This slide shows the approved north and south elevation plans for the one of the 2 townhouse buildings on the subject property containing 10 units. And then this slide shows the building located on Block 7 as well, with the approved north and south elevation plans for the 12-unit townhouse building. So in terms of the purpose and effect of the current final plan of condominium application, it establishes a condominium comprised of the 22 townhouse units and common elements to the development. Includes shared ownership and maintenance of the surface parking area, access aisle, amenity area, landscaped open space areas, utilities, and stormwater management facilities, and culminates in the registration of the condominium plans and the condominium agreement on title. This slide is one of the proposed condominium plans as part of the application. All of the plans put forward by the applicant are included in Exhibit E of the staff report. With respect to this application, no correspondence has been received or no public inquiries have been received to date. In terms of the recommendation within the staff report, we're requesting that the recommendation be approved and forwarded to council for the July 9th council meeting for consideration. Basically recommends approval of the application, that approval be subject to the owner entering into an agreement with the city. That agreement provides for further notice to the condominium corporation and present and future purchasers of the conditions contained within the parallel site plan control agreement that is already registered on title, making the condominium corporation responsible for maintaining the approved site works and fulfilling the conditions of the agreement. It authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute the condominium agreement, which is included as part of the staff report subject to the satisfaction of the Director of Legal Services. With respect to the agreement, both the applicant and legal services have indicated that they're satisfied with the proposed agreement. And then finally, that the Director of Legal Services is authorized to forward the signed stamped originals of the final plan of condominium to the Land Registry Office for registration.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, that
All
concludes
set?
my presentation, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. I'll turn to the committee. Any questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Kiley.
Just thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. This, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Does this type of approval usually come this far in development? Normally, like the building is pretty much done, right? Since Councillor Chappelle's district. Would they normally have the approval for their condo before they go this far in building, or is it just up to the developer?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of developing the condominium plans, it is easier for the developer once the actual building is up, and in terms of pinpointing and surveying the exact lines of division of where the land division will take place to form the condominium. The Planning Act does provide for an exemption from draft plan of condominium approval and allows an applicant to proceed directly from site plan to final plan of condominium because we already have a development agreement registered on title, and so this process is typical.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
Question, is this a series of similar condo developments? I notice it's a multi-use, but it doesn't, talks about different uses in that in the report. It's not clear to me that it's pretty small. So, and sometimes there's lack of economies of scale. I suppose the city has no say in this, but lack of economies of scale can make it difficult for a condo development of this size to function efficiently. So I don't know if we have any say about that. I doubt it, but I'm wondering if there's further associated condo development to come.
Chair, this is the first block to be developed within the plan of subdivision. This slide shows that there are, 6 other blocks to be developed for both standalone residential high-density buildings as well as mixed-use buildings on the site. There is one owner for the entire subdivision lands that were purchased after the draft plan of subdivision was approved. So it's one development that will be followed by 6 additional site plan applications for each block shown on the plan. And the developer, from my understanding, tends to favor a condominium form of development, so that's potentially what's to unfold for this site.
Fair, we have no control over what, because if there are problems, it'll partly be the city's responsibility, so I'm interested in that. But
Yes, I believe there's another staff member.
Through the chair. Yeah, Councillor, you're correct. It is up to the developer to make that. It's a business decision on their part. Each subsequent block that would proceed, if it were to go by plan of condominium, would form its own condominium corporation. So it is a business decision. It's quite common to see it done in phases.
that's okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none? Yes, Councillor Chappelle.
I understand it's likely too late to suggest this in the site planning recommendation, but if there is further residential development in blocks 1 through 6, I would hope that whoever the planner is working with the developer, that they insist on having electric charging stations for these units.
Even through you, Mr. Chair, staff will make note of that request and pass it on.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions from the committee, members of the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to Ms. Lambert for her presentation and the questions so far. I'm generally supportive of the project. Just have a number of questions. Has the extension of Centennial Drive been completed all the way up to Creekford and all the way back around? I know it's been in progress for a while. I'm just wondering if it's done. I'm wondering if there's any prospective Kingston transit service to the new development, given this is one of 6 blocks we put in. I've got an idea on that, which I'm going to ask you right up, but it's getting late, so I'm not going to take it now. You're describing 22 unit stacked townhouses here. I'm wondering how many bedrooms in total are included in that when it's completed. And then my last question is, what's the completion schedule? Looks like the project is pretty well along. Are we talking finished by the end of this year, or could you be?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but could we? The only question before us is on approval of a condominium. All of the questions you've asked would be part of the record of the previously approved zoning and project things, and would all be available on Dash, as I understand it. Would that be correct? Number of bedrooms, things like that would be available from our past approvals.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, thank you. We'll go back into the committee. Any further questions? A mover and a shaker? Councillor Sanik? Councillor Chappelle? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have no motions. We have no notices of motion. We have no other business that I'm aware of. We did receive correspondence. Date and time of the next meeting is August 1st in this room at 6:30. Yes, and I believe some of us had in our calendars next week's meeting, which was canceled. So that's the good news. We just made Councillor Chappelle's day. So I'll see you next Tuesday, but not at planning. So thank you very much. And does anybody have a key to the councillor's room? Because I truly do have a bag of beer that I'm willing to share.